Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to Tarhaka on Mana El Bay. And tonight, tonight's presentation will be about civilization started in Africa, not in India. We want to attach truth He has not dialed into the broadcast. That'll give me plenty of time to go ahead and Hello, everybody. This is Tarhaka again. This is a reminder of the remedies available to you in this country. A private man or woman can live a debt-free life if you choose, and that includes private banking. The use of your proper status in commerce is a fantastic tool to use. Request my free report at tarhakadataelimination.org. Instead of setting up a will that'll probably end up in probate, why don't you set up your private trust? Exercise your secured party and creditor status. Contact me at my website and set yourself free. That's Tarhaka Debt Elimination. Hello, everybody. This is Tarhaka again. This is a reminder of the remedies available to you in this country. A private man or woman can live a debt-free life if you choose, and that includes private banking. The use of your proper status in commerce is a fantastic tool to use. Request my free report at tarhakadataelimination.org. Instead of setting up a will that'll probably end up in probate, why don't you set up your private trust? Exercise your secured party and creditor status. Contact me at my website and set yourself free. That's tarhakadataelimination.org. tarhakadataelimination.org. Get out of debt. Now is the time for you to set yourself free. Peace. Okay, everybody. I hope everybody can hear me. Let me open up the commercials and check and see if my host is ready to go. Hello, everybody. This is Tarhaka again. This is a reminder of the remedies available to you in this country. A private man or woman can live a debt-free life if you choose, and that includes private banking. The use of your proper status in commerce is a fantastic tool to use. Request my free report at tarhakadataelimination.org. Instead of setting up a will that'll probably end up in probate, why don't you set up your private trust? Exercise your secured party and creditor status. Contact me at my website and set yourself free. That's TarhakaDebtElimination.org. TarhakaDebtElimination.org. Get out of debt. Now is the time for you to set yourself free. Peace. Hello, everyone. Things are changing rapidly in our world today. This is the greatest time and point in history to get yourself free from debt and change your status in commerce by moving out of the public and into the private. Being a secured party and creditor is some of what you need to know. Join our mailing list by leaving your email address in the Join Our Mailing List box at TarhakaDebtElimination.org. Mortgages, student loan, credit card, IRS, private banking is also some of what you need to know how to achieve. TarhakaDebtElimination.org. Don't forget, the greatest focal point in your life is when preparedness and opportunity meet. TarhakaDebtElimination.org. Now is the time. Right now. Get out of debt. Area code 773. Dr. Walter Williams, are you with us?
Yes, can you hear me, Brother Tarhaka?
Yes, I hear you loud and clear, man. We had some technical difficulties on the direct call-in, but we're live and on the air. I just want to make sure that you're in here.
Okay, I'm here.
All right. What I want to do is I encourage the listening audience to make sure they have paper and pencil to write this stuff down, because I got the information that I was trying to tell you about. I got the authors and the books and where they can go and verify the information that I was trying to tell you about, because I thought I made it perfectly clear to you that I'm not an African and I did not come from Africa. So what we want to do is not only lay the facts on the table, but I also want to attach the truth to it from every conceivable angle, and I think this will do it because we was able to select this information out of our college curriculum, and we're ready to roll. But nevertheless, you say you wanted to do civilization started in Africa, not in India, China, or Europe. And before we begin, can you give our listening audience a little bit about you and what your position is before we begin?
Okay, my name is Walter Williams, born in Chicago, raised in Chicago, miseducated in Chicago. I'm the author of two books that's been out. One, The Historical Origin of Christianity, has been out for 29 years, and that thesis of that book is saying that there has never been a man that ever walked the earth in human form of any race, creed, or color by the name of Jesus Christ. Never existed. My second book has been out for 19 years, and it's called The Historical Origin of Islam. The thesis of that book is saying that there's never been a man that ever walked the earth in human form by the name of Prophet Muhammad of Islamic tradition. Okay, so I am a teacher of African ancient Egyptian consciousness. So our subject tonight is that civilization came out of Africa, not India, not China, or Europe. The base foundation of civilization for the whole entire world came from the continent of Africa, a country in Egypt. So that's my position on that. So now what is your position, Brother Tarhaka?
Well, my position is that life itself on the planet began in the Americas, and civilization itself began in the Americas. And we are native to the Americas. We were already here long before slave thing, the falsification of slavery and all of this stuff begun. We were already here
as far as my people are concerned, we don't have any records. We transcend anything that could be construed as a biblical record or any of that stuff. I think what is taking place is we have been given a total falsification of history from start to finish. Even so far as the latitude and longitude and the maps and stuff that we currently are dealing with. And what I would like to do is to put this stuff on the table for those people to examine it. We didn't come from someplace else. We were always here, and this is our land, and it has always been our land. We're not Negroes, the colors, the blacks, the African Americans. I'm not an Indian. None of the labels that are placed on us. We have no records. Our existence go beyond any recorded information about anything. However, there are people that I would like for you to examine so that you can see what they did bring forth. But I'm just telling you, based on the information that I have gathered, what I've come up with and, to draw a conclusion, and that's my position.
Okay, well now, you say you have no historical origin or information of the people that you were talking about. That's supposed to be...
No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, as far as myself and our ancient progeny, there is no label that can be put on us to, as far as a legitimate record. The premise is, and this is why I base this, the premise is that everybody has to come from somewhere. No one can say, well, you can't just be here. You had to come from someplace. And, in order for you to think that way, you have to believe that everybody came from someplace. There is no such thing as you're here. You've always been here since the beginning of creation. And that's very, very difficult for people to understand. However, the evidence that we have points to exactly that. And this is some of what I would like to lay down without no debate and nothing like that. We just want to lay the facts on the table and for the listening audience to examine it for themselves. Now, I have some authors that they can examine who will pretty much point in the same direction and pretty much tell you the same. So I would like to, I've already encouraged the listening audience to get your paper and pencil handy so that they can write down the name of the authors and their books and their works and their background and all of this stuff here. And so before I begin, I would like to lay that out, and then when we come back, then you can lay your stuff out. But let me put this down. The first author that I want the listening audience to examine is a man named Louis Agassiz. His name is Louis Agassiz, and his works is the Geological Sketches, published in 1866, Louis Agassiz. The next man is Graham Hancock, GRAHAMHANCOCK, America Before. The Key to the Earth's Civilization. And then as far as your videos are concerned, we have a brother by the name of Dane Calloway, D-A-N-E and then C-A-L-L-O-W-A-Y. And then we have another guy out of South America, it's Putumayo Ehu, that does a thorough job. His name is K-U-R-I-M-E-O, and then his last name is A-H-A-U. Dane Calloway, and he calls himself Putumayo. But anyway, this information is part of our library. And this is just a smidget of what we have right now. But Dr. Williams, if you would go ahead and give us a brief rundown on what you have to substantiate your claim, if you would.
I'm asking you. You said that there's no history of the people that you were talking about that's supposed to be indigenous to this country called America. You say you have no history of that. Is that correct?
No, you keep hearing me wrong. I'll re-explain it later, but if it would be okay with you, if you please tell us about civilization starting in Africa and not in India and China and Europe, and then I'll come back and because I'll say everything I would say. I have some plugs to run so the listening audience they can hear for themselves. And on these plugs we have Malcolm X pretty much saying the same thing, Martin Luther King telling you exactly the same thing, and there are other people. But let's go ahead and hear what your position is, and then we will take it from there.
I'm trying to tell you my position, but you have to answer some questions.
Why would I need to answer questions? You gave me the topic that you were prepared to speak on. You said civilization. You gave me, this is the topic you gave me. Civilization started in Africa, not in India, China, or Europe. That's the only thing I want you to elaborate on. Unless you want to take a little quick break, and I'll put this information out, and then we'll let the people decide for themselves. Let's just take a little quick break, and I'll be right back. Okay?
Okay.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a little quick break, and I want you to pay close attention to this information, and then we'll be right back, okay? Now, the first person coming up is Brother Malcolm X. After that, we're going to hear what Martin Luther King said, and then we're going to go from there, and we'll bring Dr. Walter Williams back in. All right, here we go.
While speaking at a formal gathering somewhere off the grid at a discreet location, just after his return from crossing the waters, Malcolm X revealed some very vital, unconventional details on what Negroes, or rather African Americans, were truly considered to be as a nationality of race prior to being called or labeled a Negro.
Aborigine, which means what? Black folks. But you never find a white aborigine. Aborigines are called natives, or they're always dark-skinned people. You and I are aborigines, but you don't like to be called an aborigine.
Malcolm X stated that the rock landed on us after he returned across the waters because he learned new things. He learned that the rock had truly landed on us and that we were from these lands. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. also stated in his I Have a Dream speech that we are held in exile in our own homeland.
The Negro is still languished in the corners of American society and finds himself in exile in his own land.
Now we have a lot of scholars out there, and individuals are missing the point. How can you be held in exile in your own homeland without it being your own homeland? The tens of millions of black Americans, or rather Indians, who disappeared in 1492 did not all die in the Holocaust inflicted within America. Hundreds of thousands were shipped to Europe and Africa as Indian slaves. The whole slave trade story was given to all of us in reverse. A mass colony of Africans were not shipped from Africa to America. The truth is that black Indians were shipped from America to Europe. They were then shipped from Spain to Africa as commodity for African resources. These black Indians, now mistaken as African Americans, were shipped back to America and classified as African slaves. This part of our history is what the school systems fail to mention in history programs. The American Society was an organization formed in 1816 with the purpose of transporting free African Americans, or rather Indian slaves, classified as Negroes back then, from the United States to settle on the west coast of Africa. During the decades, the society operated and transported more than 12,000 people to Africa, and the African nation of Liberia was founded. The term African American to refer to all black people was endorsed only since 1988 but was against the desires of the majority of black people. In fact, the term was endorsed by only 5 people, including Reverend Jesse Jackson and Ramona Etlin, leading the charge as a result of a gathering called the African American Summit, without the input of the majority of black people. Author Avis J. Smith went to the district court in Washington, D.C. to stand against this term, as well as against the notion that a small group of powerful individuals should be able to compel the masses into adopting it. The systematic destruction of the Native Americans, or rather Native Indigenous Aborigine people, and their way of life was not only one of recorded history's greatest tragedies, but as with the slave trade, deeply spiritually wounding to all involved. The utter decimation of their culture is one of the most shameful aspects of history, the extent of the damage still being downplayed and denied entry into textbooks and history lessons to this day. To watch my exclusive content, not featured anywhere on YouTube, log on to my website at imjustheretomakeyoutthink.com/films. Throughout today's society of America, people would say that history was written by the victors, but I would have to disagree with them, merely because only a loser will have the audacity to write a story to make it seem as if they won, when they didn't. When they didn't. When they didn't.
I mean, it's really important for us to remember our history. You know, unless you're one of the first Americans, you came from someplace else. Somebody brought you.
Because however much America strays away from the ideals of justice, the goal of America is freedom. Abused and scorned though we may be, our destiny is tied up in the destiny of America. Before the Pilgrim Fathers landed at Plymouth, we were here. Before Jefferson etched across the pages of history the majestic words of the Declaration of Independence, we were here. Before the beautiful words of the Star-Spangled Banner were written, we were here. That man has done this trick everywhere, here in America, to the Indians. He sent one priest to the Indians in New York and another priest to the Indians in Pennsylvania. And both of them would tell lies to both Indians. And the Indians who had never been at war with each other would start beating the tom-tom, the war drum. And then as they got ready to come together and fight, the priest would run in and say, let me be the mediator. The New York Indians, you move out to Minnesota. And the Pennsylvania Indians, you move out to Oklahoma. That would leave the whole state of New York and Pennsylvania for the white man. You see how he does it? You see how he does it? You see how he does it? You see how he does it?
Black Lives Matter has nothing to do with the original black American Indians. Black Lives Matter is a propaganda to keep blacks thinking that they're African Americans that came on slave ship. We already know. We are waking our people up to let them know that we are the American Indigenous Indians. Black Lives Matter do not represent our people. We do. Jesse Jackson do not represent our people. Barack Obama do not represent our people. We're not African Americans. We're indigenous. Our African American is Obama. Why? Because his mother's European and his father's Kenyan. That's an African American. A real Indian, American Indian is me. Both of my parents are American Indians, not from Africa.
Niggas know black people don't crack. Like, black don't crack.
Yeah, black don't crack.
It rhymes.
Yeah, what's it inconsistent?
Well, indigenous don't crack.
Indigenous.
The natives don't crack.
The natives don't
crack. You can say a native and he could be 90 years old and still be 50. I'm talking for the natives.
Yeah.
I like when
it comes to talking about African Americans, I have no education with that. Period. I don't. I'm not even connecting to that no more. Cause that's a system. That's like connecting. Say, hey, he's a bad guy. Don't hang with him. Oh, hey, I'm gonna find out for myself. I'm not African American at all. My folks is not from Africa, and a lot of people in this room, folks ain't from Africa. Might be a couple, but people just don't understand. I asked my grandma, like, yo, grandma, what's your background? She like, Redfoot and Blacktail Indian. What? Yeah, my mother and my father did. We 100% Indians. That's my other grandma. We got Cherokee in us, and European and Italian, a little Dominican. It's crazy. I'm like, what the fuck? That's why I'm over Africa. Y'all look at me funny, like, nigga, I'm African. Like, you're not though. Like, you're not. 80% of slaves was already here. It was natives. It's crazy.
80. Where you get that number from?
Shit, I just checked the books.
Which book?
Yeah.
I got a whole laptop full of this shit.
Yeah?
Yeah, just for me reading. It's not a solid book like, hey, only 1,000 slaves came here. And nah, nigga, you gotta read. You have to literally read. Like, I'm so deep into it, I don't think about a slave ship. I think about, what was a slave ship called? Jesus. What the fuck was a slave ship called that Christopher Columbus was on? Who funded that slave ship? Who paid for that boat? Like, what was these folks' race? Like, what was their background?
People don't understand. Black people did not just come from Africa. Black people were already in the States. And people got to do their history to understand black people were already in the States. People don't know that, though. They don't get that part. You know, they don't know that Nat Turner was really an Aborigine. That ain't Africa. You can look at Nat Turner and the depictions of him and know he was an Aborigine. He had a different vibe about him. So people don't really know that not all black people did not come from freaking Africa. And it's going to be very, very difficult for you to make it in that goddamn ship at the bottom of that goddamn ship for 3 months. When the food get low. Do the math. For real. Do the motherfucking math. Seriously, and just ushering everybody in on boats the long goddamn way. They not stopping. Ain't no bathrooms on that motherfucker. Come on now. Do the math. That's all you gotta do is do the motherfucking math. For real. The human body won't last that long. You on a boat for 30 days, you ain't eating nothing but fucking slop. I mean, and feces and shit of the motherfucker that's sitting next to you. You gonna die of disease, man. It's gonna be like 3 black people left whose bodies are physically fit enough to be able to withstand all that pressure under the goddamn ship. Come on. Keep that shit.
Can I just end with this one thing? These 4 brothers sitting here, we didn't all come from Africa. And there was a there was a country before 1492, and our history goes way beyond 1492. So you can't start us at 1492. We were always here.
It's time for us to stop trying to fit in with these niggas, man. One thing we gotta realize, eagles don't fly with doves. They don't fly with doves, baby. I'm grateful for them.
When I was a kid and I was watching everything Cash Money did, and all of them had each other's names tattooed on them. And this was when I was younger. I didn't understand it, but then when I started going to New Orleans, like, you know, on tour and shit.
We tried.
The way they are with each other, they love each other a different way than everybody else.
It's Indian.
That's all I can say.
It's Indian territory. It's tribes.
Like, people be thinking Indians with the Pocahontas looking, that ain't how Indians look. They look like them people in New Orleans. Louisiana, all over Louisiana. Them Indians, tribes.
Indigenous.
And when you take people that, you can say that, but when you take people in, man, we family. Family.
If you want to talk about indigenous people in America or Native Americans, they always dealt with extraterrestrials. They called them the star people. And yes, they were black. This is where the word Indian comes from the Latin word indigo, okay, which means blue-black, and it's a skin color, okay? And so the Indians that you see today are what you call $5 Indians, okay, which are Caucasians, actually white people, okay? And go look up the Dow's Commission, go read the Dow's rolls. Back in the day, white people was allowing other white people to sign the Dow's rolls, saying that they was Native Americans in exchange for benefits and assistance from the government. So all these Indians that own these casinos and own the land, and they got straight hair and they look like goddamn Mexicans and Chinese people and white people, those are what you call $5 Indians. Those are descendants of the people who actually took the land and then acted like they was the people who the land got took from. Black people are the original Indians.
Black people are Native Americans. You know, we've had, you know, a lot of proof that, you know, some of us started here in this land. Everybody wasn't brought over from Africa. So, you know, we have to, like you say, unpack all of that and try to, you know, find the true lineage of people in this country, because some, you know, I used to tease family members who would say, you know, I got a little Indian in me. I would think they didn't want to be all the way black. But when I really do the research, a lot of them did have a little Indian in them. So, you know, it's one of those things where, you know, we want to be counted on all levels, not just, you know, through slave ships. Like I said, you know, we were here before Columbus. So a lot of us, and so we want to make sure that's included and not excluded.
I'm glad that I came back to connect with my brothers and sisters here in America that was here long before Chris and the boys got here, long before America Vespucci, long before all of them people got here. We were already here. I have tribal pride. My father's Blackfoot Native American.
Godfrey, real quick. You know, as a full Nigerian, have you ever heard any like ethnic stories, like Nigerian stories, about people getting robbed by white people? Like I mean, stolen and brought across to another land. Have you ever heard an oral tradition like, don't go out into the by the river at night because you can get jumped by the white man and he'll bring you on a boat across the water?
I never heard any of that. All I heard, like my father would tell me stories, just Nigerian proverbs and stuff that it relate to just Africa.
Right, but then so there was never any proverbs or anything that related to, because like if there were millions, right?
Right.
Millions of black people that were so-called taken away from their people, right? Now, as wise as we are with proverbs, right? Like, we tell proverbs to teach lessons and shit, right? So wouldn't you want to teach a lesson so that your people would not be stolen and shit like that? You see what I'm saying?
Wow, of course. Hell yeah.
Some sort of African proverb that dealt with not getting kidnapped by the white man.
Right.
Because he'll take you over there on a boat or some shit like that.
Or like this, what story are you familiar with that you were told? And I don't even like to consider you guys Africans because that's a misnomer. You know what I mean? You guys will call yourselves by your native tribe. And there's no problem with that. Actually, that's even better. You don't go to Africa and say, hey, I'm African. Straight up.
No.
That don't happen. But hold on, let me go back to what I was saying. Have you heard of a story, pick one, any story of a war that took place where some of your kinfolk was captured and brought over to another landmass?
No.
So who are the blacks in America
Who are the black people in America?
The blacks been in America, been living here ever since. They are Aboriginals. The blacks been in.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're back. I'm going to open up my guest phone line and bring back in. Dr. Walter Williams, are you still with us?
Yes.
Okay. That's just a little couple of plugs. If you notice in the first plug, Brother Malcolm X, he said we didn't land on Plymouth Rock, coming from someplace else here. It said Plymouth Rock landed on us, which means that in order for that to happen, we were already here. Martin Luther King said in the first plug that I run that the so-called black man is languishing in this country from one end of the earth, one end of America to the other, and he is exiled in his own land. That is what he said then. But anyway, we're ready to go on in, and you can present civilization started in Africa, not in India, China, and Europe, and we're listening.
Okay, now I'm going to, as I talk, I don't want to be interrupted now.
Yes, sir. Please be brief, because I got other stuff that I got to put out. But go ahead.
But now, no.
There's nothing going to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Yeah, don't interrupt me as I talk, because I didn't interrupt your presentation. I didn't interrupt your presentation. I didn't do that. Okay? Civilization started in Africa, not India, China, or Europe. In Africa today, as I speak, there's the greatest monument that's ever been built by man. And that monument is the Great Pyramid. That Great Pyramid is also on the back of your dollar bill that you carry around in your pockets every day. Now, in order to build a pyramid, you have to know mathematics. You have to have you have to have an alphabet to be literate, etc., etc., etc. That's where civilization started. And we'll get to Malcolm X and all those, Dr. Martin Luther King and all these other people. But civilization started there. Started with literacy, the alphabet. Okay? The alphabet is the first thing you learn in school. Your ABCs. And your ABCs, as you learn them, will enable you to read, write, and spell. That makes you a literate person. Okay? So that's where you begin civilization. Whoever had the first writing system on planet Earth, okay? That pyramid did not pop up in the continent of Africa, okay? It didn't pop up. It was built by a formulation of knowledge of mathematics and being literate as a people. That's the first thing that you have to understand. Now, getting back to Malcolm X. Malcolm X, he's talking about another subject that he knows nothing about. He knew nothing about himself. If he knew anything about himself, he would be a Muslim. Martin Luther King the same way. If he knew anything about his ancestral history, etc., he would be a Christian. Same thing with Malcolm X. If he knew anything about his ancestral history, he would be no Muslim. Okay? Now, you got to follow a people who knew and started and had the first alphabet on planet Earth, and that's the indigenous African, known as the ancient Egyptian in Egypt. Okay? Now, you, Brother Tarhaka, when I told you about you call yourself a Moor, and I told you and I broke down where the name Moor came from. You were so elated with that you told me that you went into a restaurant and that you stood in the middle of the floor and told the people that you were descendant of ancient Egyptians, and you told me that the restaurant owner came out who was a white man, and he was amazed at what you were saying. Okay? Now you told me this out of your own mouth. It still stands as a fact that you cannot get an alphabet from any indigenous Indian or anything else, because the alphabet didn't come from them. Okay? So you cannot be indigenous in two places. Either you're going to be indigenous in America, if that's what you want to be, fine. Or you're going to be indigenous in Africa. Okay? And the people that you think was indigenous over here, such as the Africans, and you listen to Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and all these other people that you presented tonight, since you listen to them, what alphabet did these indigenous Africans have? What alphabet did they use over here? What alphabet? That's the question. What mathematical system did they use over here? What language did they speak over here? Et cetera, et cetera. So what I'm saying to you and the listening audience, that you have to understand where civilization began. Civilization began in Africa, not India, not China, nor Europe. With that alphabet, if a person asks you, how do you know that the ancient Egyptians had the first and oldest civilization? The answer would be because they created an alphabet, the first alphabet on earth. That's how you said that. Now, from that alphabet came the musical scale. Do, re, mi, so, fa, la, ti, do. Okay, from that musical scale, from that alphabet, you will get music as we know it today. And from that musical scale, you'll get and you will find out the world's first and oldest musicians. They were Africans. They came out of Africa, out of the ancient Egyptian culture and civilization. So if an individual wants to believe that Malcolm X, who didn't know who he was, if he did, he wouldn't have been a Muslim. Martin Luther King did not know anything about his own humanity. If he did, he wouldn't be a Christian. And all these other people out here that you presented tonight. Okay? So now, what happened to Tarhaka Amani Bey? What happened to this young man? Okay? I call myself setting him straight and putting it in his psyche that he is a descendant of the greatest people that's ever walked this earth, known in history as the ancient Egyptians. So, with that being said, I'm going to rest my case.
Okay, Dr. Williams, I certainly appreciate you giving us your side of the story. We have a person with the hand raised at area code 312. I will open up the line before we proceed. Area code 312. Tell us who you are, where you're calling from, or what's your question and comment.
Yes, good evening.
312. Good evening.
Good evening.
Can you hear me? That's you.
Yeah, that's me. That's me.
Well, what's your take on this stuff, man?
Good evening to yourself, Tarhaka, and the listening audience, Professor Williams. Good evening to you as well. Good evening. Yes. So, we start talking about where civilization was birthed. And I'd have to say that, I think that, there's a misconception as to where and how these other civilizations they're trying to make older than Egypt, but nobody has came out and said they was older than Egypt. And I also think that there were areas that at one time they didn't think we populated those areas, but we found out and new evidence is coming out saying we did populate those areas. And not only did we populate those areas, we were there before the other people showed up. Like, for instance, China. And since that's one of the civilizations they're trying to say is old and might have birthed a civilized people, but I'd have to say that what then do you do with the first two dynasties? They say were African. What do you do with that history and that's been uncovered? Who also has pyramids over there in China, but they don't talk about it. And if they were, and they were the yellow man that's populating that area now, why don't he bring his credibility to the forefront? Why they all still trying to study how Egypt did what it did, from all of the building structures and everything else that they've built, architecture there in Egypt and stuff like that. And then you can go throughout the world, even this whole Game of Thrones thing that's been coming out lately and saying and suggesting and other information is surfacing now saying that even Scotland, Irishmen, there's a book called How the Irish Became White, been out for years, questioning whether or not the Irishmen, the original, were in fact white, or were they black folks. And there's a book out called to deal with Scotland, talking about Scotland's royal lineage. And this movie that's Game of Thrones, there's a woman that wrote a book on the Lannisters. And I can't think of the name of the book right now, but she's suggesting that the Lannisters were three African brothers who that story is really about. And there's another white woman who named Miranda Kaufman, Black Tudors. She said that the Tudors of England and back in that day, these were black folks who were craftsmen, or not craftsmen, but they were musicians and things like this and craftsmen back in that day. But you got a TV program now talking about Tudors. So, I say that it started with Egypt, but we just didn't stay in one place, and which is what people would like for us to believe. We just sat there in Egypt and we never went anywhere. We went all throughout the world before anybody else pretty much showed up. Now, how these other people come out of this whole story, I don't know. I'd like to know that story, especially having a different complexion than you. But how do you rectify or explain China's two dynasties were African, and then you got 800,000 black folks who live and reside in China today, but they never talked about, and they never moved there to military, service and nothing like that. They were born and raised there, and they've been there all the time. But of course, that 800,000 is a drop in the bucket compared to the billion Chinese, the yellow Chinese who are there in that area, so they don't get talked about. Japan, it's well known that the samurai right now, there's books out saying that the samurai were African as well. So where did they come from? the Japanese don't talk about that, not the yellow one that we know. They don't talk about that. But I think Oshawa Kwesi and I believe Umar Johnson mentioned this one time, that when they went there to speak, they got introduced and they thought they were going to speak to some Chinese folks, and they went there and they saw that there were black people in Japan, born and raised there. So I think it started with us, and I think that civilization came out of Egypt, and it spread it throughout the world. That's my little 2 cents. That's what it looks like it's showing up right now with all the new information that's out.
Okay, well, let me ask you this right here, Brother Yoel. Are you of the persuasion that all of us on the continent of America, are here and came from a land called Africa? Is that your position? Or do you think that it is humanly possible that we were already here?
I think it was humanly possible that we were already here, and we were already here. Even the movie with what's his name? The movie National Treasures with Nicolas Cage in it kind of dropped some science in that, and he said that this land belonged to what is called the Olmec people inside that movie. See, movies, and you have to understand, it's not just a movie. They be throwing some history out there too, but you have to be able to listen and hear them and see what they're showing you in order to piece it together. So he said the Olmec people were who? That's us. So, and I think that what we keep also forgetting is that at one time the land was lost. Like I said, we didn't sit on just that little piece of property that's called the continent of Africa and how it's shaped today. Before the continental drift and all of that stuff, it would have been possible for us to be sitting on a piece of property that was floating while we were on it, dividing the way it looks today. So yes, it's plausible that we were already here, and there are evidence that we were already here. There are books out talking about African presence here, several books out talking about that. So, and somebody just told me another little theory, but I don't know how much truth I can put in that, but they were talking about how they brought and introduced this, what you call so-called Native American that we know today, to this land, that they were not actually Aboriginal of this land. They came from somewhere too. But I don't know, I don't have any more evidence on that, but however, they're here. And if you look at them back when we were coming up and you saw the movies, those people were very dark. Even though you had a black and white TV, they were very dark back then. And even when the TVs became color, you saw so-called Native Americans that were very dark. And as Kaba Hawassa says, you can't get a red man unless you got some black and some brown. So, again, possibilities. What's possible in the field of possibilities, and that's all plausible, and that's all possible that we were, yes, here. And I think I'm of the belief that we were already here. Yes.
Okay. Before I go back to Dr. Walter Williams, I mentioned before you got in here, an author, and this guy was a geologist. His name is Luis Agassiz. He wrote a book called Geological Sketches, and what I'm going to publish in 1866, and I'm just going to read one paragraph of what he said, and this comes from 1866. This is the first page. It says, America, the Old World, firstborn among the continent, though so much later in culture and civilization than some of more recent birth. America
so far as her physical history is concerned, has been falsely denominated the New World. Hers was the first dry land lifted out of the waters. Her, the first shore washed by the ocean that enveloped all the earth beside. And while Europe was represented only by islands rising here and there above the sea, America already stretched an unbroken line of land from Nova Scotia to far west. In the present state of our knowledge, our conclusion respecting the beginning of the Earth's history, the way in which it took form and shape as a distinct separate planet must, of course, be very vague and hypothetical. Okay, that is the only part that I want to put out by this gentleman here. This is Louis Agassi's Geological Sketches. And I want to, before I go to Dr. Williams, I want to ask you a couple of questions because I got them down, and Dr. Williams can follow me on this because I have the same questions for him. Could you please tell me where, Brother Yoel, to the best of your ability, are the Negros located in a place called Egypt in North Africa? Could you tell me where they are?
You said tell you where the Negro is
yes,
in a place called Egypt?
In Egypt, yes, in Egypt. If you know anything about that, if you could tell me where the Negro.
Know exactly where they are, but I will say that probably you will find them in remote areas and not in necessarily in what we see on TV and all that kind of stuff. You notice they never show you. I ain't seen what Cairo look like yet, unless I see it in some pictures in a book and I just see architecture. I never seen the people. They don't show you the people walking around like somebody go there and film it and show you those people. I see where people like Browder and other people will go there and they see and there's this Arab-looking guy standing in front of the pyramids or by the pyramids or moving about, but that's about it. But whether or not they go there and they see us there, which some of them Arabs probably were us because, you know, they were probably, but then again, some of them might have been just dark in that particular area, but you don't, so I don't know. I think that if the Negro is there, we just have to go find him, and he is there, you know. And some of those people are descendants from them. I think it was Anwar, not Sadat. It was which one was the president of Egypt? And he said
okay. Well, one more question. This is my last question to you, and your personal opinion, as far as you know, who created the word Egypt and Egyptian, in your personal opinion?
Well, I'd have to go by that's what he said, and we can tell you that best. The Coptic Ethiopians created that name.
All right. Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to mute your mic, and I'm going to ask Dr. Walter Williams. Dr. Williams, are you still with us?
Yes.
Okay. Could you please tell me who created the word Egypt and Egyptian? Where did that come from?
Okay, I'm going to tell you.
Egypt and Egyptian, because that's the word that you have been using. So who created that?
Okay, I'm going to tell you who created it. When the Greeks came into Egypt under the leadership of Alexander the Greek, the Melkite Coptic Egyptians who ran the government of ancient Egypt met them. Seeing that these Greeks were not going to leave, the ancient Egyptians learned the Greek language so they can be able to communicate with the Greeks. The Greeks had nothing of civilization that they brought into Egypt with them. Nothing. They were uncivilized, inferior, spiritually dead savages. And once they learned the language of the Greeks, I'm talking about the Melkites, so they can communicate with them, the Greeks eventually asked the ancient Egyptians, who are you? And the ancient Egyptians, using the Greek language so they can communicate with the Greeks, said that they were Egyptus Egyptos. And that's where the name Egypt comes from. It was a name coined by the ancient Egyptians for themselves. That is my answer. Now, what's your other question?
My other question is, where on earth is a place called Kemet located?
That's what Kemet is. There's no land area called Kemet. Okay, you tell me, because I've been looking for Kemet for 46 years, 47 years. I still haven't found it. That's another decoy that the Europeans put in the minds of you Africans to take you away from ancient Egypt. See? That's another name and another ploy that they took you away from ancient Egypt, to tell you that this word Kemet means the land of the blacks or the black land. Okay? Now...
Okay. Okay, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, what I want to ask you one more time, you believe, or your position is, that all of the people here that look like me and you came from Africa to this land on a boat. Is that correct?
They came on a boat with Christopher Columbus, yes, 1492.
Okay. All right. All right. Okay. Well, what I'm going to do is take a little quick break, and we'll be right back, Dr. Williams. Just hold on a minute. We'll be right back. All right, ladies and gentlemen, y'all. I want y'all to hold on a minute. The number to dial into the broadcast is 515-605-9757. That's 515-605-9757. If you have something to say, press 1 on the phone, and that will give me an indication that you have something to say. But in the meantime, we're going to take a little quick break, and we'll be right back. Y'all hold your head. We'll be right back. Hello, everybody. I want to introduce you to The Great Debate by Dr. Walter Williams. He single-handedly laid out the facts in this powerful debate against Mr. Munir Muhammad of the Nation of Islam, Chester Blair, a prominent lawyer in Chicago, Illinois, and Reverend Henry Hardy, a prominent minister in Chicago, and Prince Azio Ben Israel of the Hebrew Israelites. This debate was hosted by a retired policeman named W.L. Lillard. Now, the whole thing was a setup by Lillard and his gang, but it didn't work. They brought what they believed to the table, but Dr. Walter Williams brought what he knew for a fact and what he could prove and laid it on the table. We are now in the age of knowing. The age of walking around believing in stuff is over. For your copy of The Great Debate, go to TarhakaDataElimination.org. That's TarhakaDataElimination.org, or contact me by phone. My number's on the website. Oh, and by the way, the lawyer got bust up too. The Great Debate. Get your copy today. Good day and peace.
these seemed only begin to appear after the arrival of the Mongoloid. Conquest by the Mongoloids would explain why there are no Aborigines in the Americas today.
As long as they were on the reservation, they were Indian. As soon as they left the reservation, for whatever reason, they became free people of color. Then finally they became African Americans, same people. And you could see it in the lifetime of a single individual. This journey, it changes in classification.
Welcome to Real Black Consciousness Forum Podcast. This is Big VG on the check-in. Today's conversation, we're going to talk about some history. We're going to talk about the first Americans. We're going to talk about the original Americans. We're going to talk about the Aborigines. And we're just going to have like conversation about like what direction is this platform going, the Real Black Consciousness Forum Podcast. Like what direction are we going, right? We're going to have that conversation today. And we're going to, of course, we're going to produce a couple of sources. And, like all of our conversations, you can find the sources in the description box, right? You can click on the link. You can read it yourself in its entirety. You can fact check, when you have a conversation about history or whatever, it's always good to get the source from the person. You don't really want to take anybody's word for it. Because, truth be told, the American Negro is in the position that we're in because all we ever did was take folks' word. You know what I'm saying? And then, even with that, my goodness, talking about taking somebody's word, we took the devil's word for it. So whatever the devil say, many of us as American Negroes, we just regurgitate it, right? We don't dig in those crates, right? We don't dig in those libraries. We don't go back and get those older, earlier works that writers and explorers talked about. We just don't do it. But today is a new day. We're learning different things. We're reading different things. We're challenging the status quo, right? We just don't take it like, we got a couple of elders still hanging around to these old stories, right? These stories are outdated, but we holding on. But those stories is not going to last long, right? Here on Real Black Consciousness Forum Podcast, the direction that we go in is based on the comments. The comments is the engine and the fuel to the machine, right? So dig this, right? Going over the comments, there was a brother, and he was a little confused, right? He was like, when I listen to more recent conversations, it sounds like it's a little different, than your older conversations. Like it's almost sound like you're saying the opposite thing. So of course, we're not here to confuse anybody. And with that being said, we're gonna show up a particular position that we have on this platform. Now, here on Real Black Consciousness Forum Podcast, we have always taught from day one that the original man, the black man, was in the Americas prior to the slave trade and prior to Columbus even finding this place, right? He found the place with a whole bunch of people on it. Dig that, right? When we say that, what tends to happen is that if you listen to our older conversations, right, we're kind of like, a lot of that is geared toward a community that call themselves, we gave them the label, possibly. We call them the Aboriginal community, right? And these are a group of people that says, they're American Negroes. They say that we was always here, which I can connect with, right? But they do something a little different. They take a pivot. And they say that they are the original Indians. And when they say they are the original Indians, they do that in terms of like great Indian nations. So our people begin to call themselves Cherokee and Choctaw and Chickasaw and Cheyenne and Lakota and, et cetera, et cetera. This is what our people was doing. Now, in a sense, it's like, as we used to say on older conversations, It looked like, it's the Red Indian train is on the move. And it's a bunch of Negroes, American Negroes, they're trying to jump on that train. They're not doing that because this is something to do. What's actually happened is that, you got some voices, some guys, they're like YouTube famous, right? It's a Callaway guy. It's a guy we call Miho here, right? And there's a few others, and they say things such as, when I say they, I mean the Aboriginal community, saying things like, the African slave trade never existed, it never happened, right? They say things like that. They say things like, Big Mama said she was Indian, right? They say things like that. They say things like, what else do these guys say? They do this. It's like they do what I call picture scholarship too. They kind of match up these pictures, right, with these ancient monuments, but check it out. At the end of it all, this is what's happening. In doing so, it's kind of like our people, they really don't explain to our people their position in this territory in the West that we call the Americas, right? So you can see maybe 450, maybe 500 Red Indian tribes. And if you tell our people that they're Indian and you don't do it properly, they will think that they are the real Indian from a Red Indian nation. So now you got American Negroes saying they're the original Cherokee. They're the original Choctaw. They're the original blase, 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 right? And then while they're doing that, they're kind of like throwing some cold water on the fact that they're mixed with the African. You see what I'm saying? So they minimize the African part of them, and they maximize what I would consider like the Red Nation, but they're doing it out of error almost. So if you listen to our older conversations, what we do, we try to bring the balance to, because that's what's going on, right? The truth be told, though, is that here on Real Black Consciousness Forum Podcast, we stand on and we show and prove that when it comes to the West, right, the American Negro is found in I'm talking about in large numbers, Central America, South America, and the islands, right? When we talk about the territory that we call the United States, it's California and Florida. Everywhere else is like small pockets, right? We could be found in the Carolinas. We can come all the way down from Virginia to the Carolinas, to Alabama, Tennessee, and then you got Mississippi, Louisiana. And then also, we're going to speak on later about Negroes in Canada. But we're talking about small pockets of people. Now, the thing about it when I say small pockets is that, dig this, the territory that we call the United States was never heavily populated by red people neither. This whole, that's the kind of like the issue I got with Jack Forbes. Like, he's a guy, he's a scholar, but he kind of paints this picture like, there's millions and millions of people here. And there never was millions and millions of people in the territory that we call the United States. It just wasn't so, right? There were always pockets of people that was here. So how I see these Aboriginal guys is this. This is kind of like what they do that we totally disagree with on this platform. See, the American Negro was always here. You can't be a Cherokee, in my estimate. You can't be a Choctaw, in my estimate. You can't be none of these Red Indian tribes, in my estimate, because you, as the American Negro, was already here before they got here. So how did you become a Cherokee when you was here before them? So in all transparency, like if you listen to we kind of clown these guys a little bit. Well, we don't kind of, we clown them a little bit. Like, they running around saying the slave trade never happened. And they talking about, I'm the real Choctaw. And I'm like, you going from one oppressor to another oppressor. Check this out. Let me say it this way, right? Let me say it this way. There was a part in our development as American Negroes where we were Christians, right? And I want to put a time on it. So I'm going to say, let's just say the early 1920s, right? The bulk of our people was converted to Christians, which is a Jewish religion, right? So to some respect,
as an American Negro, if your religion is Christianity, you're underneath Jews. You may not see it that way, but you're underneath Jews, right? I don't care what color you make the Jews. You can do that whenever you want to do that. That's your business. But you're underneath Jews, right? Then came like a deeper sense of black consciousness, right? And it started to arise after the 1920s. And we wanted to be closer to self. We wanted to be closer to, like, it was a blackness kind of thing. It was a opening movement that we was kind of like spiritually and soulfully we're changing. In this change, many of our people became Muslims, right? Because we felt that Islam was our truest self, right? Islam is our truest self. And then before you know it, we start, bumping our head on the ground 5 times a day. We start praying to Mecca, you know what I'm saying? We start visiting Mecca. And what actually happened was we went from following these Jewish devils to running behind these Arab devils. And we feel like when we was running behind these Arab devils, we was closer to ourselves. But when you see our people jump from Judaism or Christianity to Arabism or Mohammedanism, that's pretty much what we was doing. And we felt like we was being closer to ourselves. In a sense, that's how I feel like the Aboriginal community is doing. They're not teaching our people that you were here before these Cherokees ever came around. They're not doing that. They're kind of doing something different. They got a different song and dance. Here on Real Black Consciousness Forum Podcast, we teach this like, see, the American Negro, if you look at it in a sense, the black man is almost the last person here in the United States, right? It's a weird way we put it, though, because, see, first of all, when we talk about the Southeast Territory of the United States, and we're going to touch on Ohio today as well, the Midwest. See, the people that build the mounds, we call them mound builders. There's a sect of us with knowledge of self that when we talk about pre-Columbian American Negroes, we use the term mound builders. We are the people that built the mounds. That separates you from trying to be a person of a red Indian nation, because even in their own tribal testimony, I don't care if they're Chickasaw or they're Cherokees or they Choctaw, they admit they did not build those mounds. They admit that it was another race of people that built those mounds already. When they got to these territories, those mounds was already there. These tombs was already there. These ancient relics was already there. They had nothing to do with that. They admit to that in their own tradition. What we're saying is that our people was the ones that was already here. That's it. That rubs a lot of our Afrocentric brothers the wrong way, because they got this thing in their head. They want everybody to be from Africa, right? It's like a very weird dynamic when it comes to them. Like everybody that's black, they got the same paint job as the African, had to somehow come from Africa. But see, the original man, as the messenger taught us, the original man, we don't have a birth record. You can't put a date on us. You can't put a territory on us. We're the original people of the planet. We was always here. So it's kind of weird, and I use this example often. When it comes to like these Afrocentric guys, they do what we call like the thin air approach. So when we talk about the American Negro, he had to come from somewhere. He had to migrate from Africa there, because he couldn't just always be here. So we can show him, we can show and prove that archaeologists can date back Negro skulls for thousands of years in Brazil. And then, the Afrocentric guys say, well, he came from Africa. And then we can say, well, what about the Negroes in Solomon Islands? So, well, he came from Africa. You say, well, what about the Negroes, the Aboriginals in Australia? Oh, well, he came from Africa. They got this little thing. They make everybody from Africa. And then they say, well, life started in Africa. And then in the very same breath, they'll tell you about taking an ancestry test. And I'm like, well, beloved, if everybody comes from Africa, what are we running around taking an ancestry test? We're going to all go back to Africa, right? So that means that the German is African, that the Swedish guy is from African, the Arab is really African, the Chinese guy is really African. No, they don't do that. They just put the African label on the people that got the same paint job as the African. But it's kind of unique because, see, the African Negro can come out of thin air. He don't have no origins. He just always was here. So I guess it's something about the water, the air, I don't know. It's something about that landmass that it can just produce the Negro out of thin air, the African Negro out of thin air. But the American, something about, I guess the air is different over here in the Americas. It just can't produce the Negro out of thin air, or Solomon Islands, or Australia, or wherever we are, right? When we talk about the Americas, though, many of us with knowledge of self, and this is different than the Aboriginals. We don't say that the American Negro was the only people here in the territory that we call the United States. There was never a landmass. There's never going to be a continent with one kind of people on it. Even when the explorers got here, when they talked about and they used the term Indian, they said the Indians came in all shades: yellow, brown, red, and black. We skipped and overlooked the black part all the time. No matter where he went, North America, South America, we skipped the fact that there was Negroes here. We just overlook it. Not us. But this is how many of our Afrocentric brothers do. Right? So that's what's kind of going on in our earlier conversations up until now. Now we have more of a pivot because we was underneath the impression that all American Negroes knew there was no such thing as 100 million Africans coming over here on the slave trade. We just took that for granted. So, of course, this conversations that we have on this platform, it's geared by the comments. So we're just looking at the comments and we're like, yo, there's no way our people believe that now. So now this is the part of history that we're on. We talk about Negroes being in the Americas prior to the slave trade because the way it works when you do the knowledge, right, sound and right reasoning, we are a mixture of people, the American Negro. So the American Negro was always here. And then we have a slave trade that happens later. So the slave trade brought two different kind of groups here. It brought the East Indian here, and it brought the African here. But the way that they was pushing the slave codes on our people is that we couldn't mix with the so-called devil. We couldn't do it. We had to mix with other people of color. We was all in a melting pot together. So, I can procreate with a Mexican or a Red Indian or another American Negro or an African or East Indian. It didn't matter because we was all in the same melting pot together. All in the same mixing pot if you're from the North, right? That's going to bring out a new species. So this is how I use that. I kind of flip it. I say, yo, the black man was technically the last person here, but at the same time, we was the first person here because we're new now. We're like gumbo now. So if Aboriginals come like, oh man, you're original, and they start naming tribes, brother, or sister, even the elders always taught us that the Negro lost the knowledge of himself, of our religion. We stripped of our, our native tongue. We stripped of the knowledge of self. That only applies to the American Negro. Everybody else know who they are. The African know who he is. He come over, he already know. He ain't trying to figure nothing out. The red man know who he is. The Mexican know who they is. And we're going to have a conversation about the origin of the Mexican because it's not what you think, but that's going to come later. Everybody know who they are. They've never been stripped of anything, but the American Negro, he's confused. Even our brothers in the Caribbean, they know who they are.
Yeah. This is what we do here. This is telling you about the Garifuna people, how they came. They are combined of three cultures put together.
Okay.
The Caribbean, the Arawak Indian, and the African.
Okay.
Yeah. No, these Garifuna people are the pre-Columbus African before the slave trade began. No, these Garifuna people are the pre-Columbus African before the slave trade began. No, these Garifuna people are the pre-Columbus African before the slave trade began.
It's the Islanders. Is that it?
Who are the Caribs?
And they're from South America, right? Or like the Guyanas.
Yeah. Well, who are they?
I'm not sure.
You have to do your history, friend.
Yeah.
Where do you think the black people here come from?
I'm not sure. It's either like slave ship or they came from Africa, right? What do you think?
We've never been African.
Never. they don't really stay on.
We're not with the Africans. We are the Caribs.
Right.
We are the Caribs. Our ancestors are the Caribs. We man this. We control this. We inhabited this. Yeah. The sea was named for us, the Caribbean. We are the Caribs. The Africans came after. The Africans came after.
The Africans came after.
But the Afrocentric guys, they're very unique because what they do is when you start to learn about yourself, they act as an overseer to tell you where you're from. And they only tell you where you're from because you got the same pay job as them. So they give you this whole song and dance that you got an African ancestry. And beloved, believe me when I tell you, 99.9% of the time, when you see an American Negro talking about an African ancestry, he cannot point out anybody in his line that's from Africa. Not one single person, not one. America is his ancestral homeland, him or her. But it's just the weirdest thing. Like, it's weird, man. You just can't.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back. I'm going to open up the phone lines and let my guests in. I just want to drop that little bit of information down there. Dr. Walter Williams, area code 773. Are you still with me, my brother?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. I can hear you loud and clear. I have a question for you.
Okay.
Can you tell me name a person for us in listening, myself and the listening audience, of someone in your family that was an African that came to America and is now an Egyptian from North Africa in a place called Egypt?
That's not the question. The question is a group.
I just told you what the question was. One second. Let me ask the question again, because you may not have heard me. Can you tell me of anybody in your immediate family that came across the Atlantic Ocean on a slave ship that was an African in a place in North Africa called the ancient African Egyptian in North Africa? Just give us a name. I'll write it down and we'll do the research on that individual.
I told you before. I'm going to tell you again. We did not come on a slave ship over here. We came by way of the ship of Christopher Columbus in 1492, 127 years before slavery. And that's the information, that's the history that is never told to us as a people. Okay? Now, so you got to go back in history to find out why we were put on the ship of Christopher Columbus to be put out of Spain and out of the Vatican. There's a history to that. And I've told that history many times on your program as to where we came from, how we got here in the Americas, et cetera, and why they wanted to eliminate us. You got to go back to 1478, the Spanish and Roman Inquisition in Spain. They wanted to get rid of the Moors out of Spain and out of the Vatican for racial reasons. They don't want the world to know that these Africans from Africa, from Egypt, brought civilization to them. And you, Brother Tarhaka, you walk around and you call yourself a Moor. And I explained to you about how you got that name, Moor. And you somehow lost that information along the line because you've been listening to these people that you've been playing on this program this evening, such as that last brother who is a Nation of Islam follower of Elijah Muhammad, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, and others. That's confusion. Don't you get it? They do not want you. They mean the European does not want you, us, as an African people, to relate to Egypt. That's where civilization begins. They don't want you to relate to that. They want you to be an African slave all the time, as long as you don't know who you are. Who built the Great Pyramid? Who brought literacy to this world? Who brought music to this world? Things like that. The African people. I'm talking about as a whole. They don't want you to know that. As long as you don't know that, then they can control your mind and confuse your mind. You have presented so much confusion on your program tonight. I hear this reeking with confusion. And somehow it got to you.
Could you hold on a moment? Let me open up Brother Yoel. Appreciate your answer, but hold on a moment. Brother Yoel, are you with me?
Yes,
are you with us, Brother Yoel? Okay.
Yes.
This is my question to you. Can you tell me of anyone that you know in your personal family that was put on a slave ship and brought across the Atlantic Ocean to this land as an African that came from North Africa in a place they call Egypt?
No, sir, I cannot tell you that because I haven't did any research into my family like that, so no, I can't.
Okay, well, thank you very, very, very much. And do you have anything else that you would like to add based on? Go ahead.
Yeah, well,
based on the information that the young man just, go ahead.
I have to say that there's one narrative. Again, I go back to, what if we're all right? And we were here, and we did come on the boat with Columbus, but some of us were already here before Columbus. So we got books that say there's research and history books that say we were here before Columbus. So what if all of that was true, but we just keep tweaking one piece of it and running with the one piece we got, entertaining any other pieces that could be injected or put together to give us a better look at the whole picture, So again, we don't consider that maybe the land was locked and some Africans were sitting on it and all of that kind of stuff. So the Indian word Indian, as far as I know, and Professor Williams can maybe tell you a little bit better on that, but as far as I know, it came from the Columbus. Them thought they were selling to India, and these were Indians when they saw them. So if that's the case, then that we know that's a misnomer. He wasn't in the Indians, so why he calling them Indians? Why we still today calling them Indians? And they're not Indians. They're the East Indian. He's from India, and that's who the Indian is. So, so the brother that was talking from the Caribbean, to that I say this, that if you got a family right now, and you in Jacksonville, Florida, and some of your children or progenitors or move from Jacksonville and end up in Tacoma, Washington, 500 years from now, are they going to deny that they were ever in, and they've been gone from Jacksonville, Florida, are they going to deny they ever been in Jacksonville, Florida? Because they've been in Tacoma, Washington for about 500 or 1,000 years or whatever time. Maybe that's what they were brought up on. Because as far as I know, I was born in Mississippi. I didn't know where I came from before Mississippi. So, but that don't mean that my family didn't come from somewhere else before they ended up in Mississippi. But my knowledge only goes to Mississippi. So the people who he's talking about, there was Caribs, I believe they were a dark-skinned people, but it could have been that those same people were also, when the land was locked and it floated apart and all of the islands was created, could have been Africans that came out of Africa that possibly came out of also the seat of Africa, Egypt, and that's how they got there. So, it's possible that we all could be right here. And we arguing about our own little piece that we bring to the table and saying this is and that ain't over there. So I don't know. It's all food for thought and grounds for further investigation. But I will say that also new information is coming out now. Like these two white women I mentioned writing these books. They in awe about history that they're finding out about England and Scotland and all of that. So they're writing about it. They're amazed that there was these black folks there, and they never thought that these black folks were ever there. But their research, whatever caused them to begin that research, is proving that there were some other people there. So there's new evidence now coming out, and a lot of writings are talking about that there will come a time when all that was been hidden, that stuff is going to be revealed now. It's going to be uncovered because new information is coming out. And remember, we're going into the information age. And the information age, Aquarius, means that it ain't going to be old information. This is new information, new research, or research that's coming out of it, something that probably somebody maybe wrote a long time ago, and they hid and they didn't want to get that, so that's all been covered up, and they created a new narrative, and now that old stuff that they thought they hid is resurfacing now, busting them out. So it's food for thought and grounds for further investigation. That's kind of how I see it. I'm staying open to it all, but I'm attaching myself to that people called Egyptians. I'm attaching myself to them.
All right, but here's my next question to you. What if, just hypothetically, on the bottom of the ground, right off that cliff or something, what if the original Kemet Egyptians were in the Americas first, and then they went to North Africa? What if something like that happened? What you think about that?
Okay, well,
hold on, man. Take a break. Go get some water. I'll be right back. All right, ladies and gentlemen, the title of the broadcast, Civilization Started in Africa, Not in India, China, or Europe. Our special guest is Dr. Walter Williams, and we have a series of questions that we're going to come right back, but we're going to take another break, and we'll be right back. Yo, hold on. We'll be right back.
To watch my exclusive content, not featured anywhere on YouTube, log on to my website at I'mJustHereToMakeYouThink.com/films. In today's society of America, many people are undergoing a benevolent process of changes in their life by decontaminating the poisonous traditional forms of indoctrination and overcoming the complexity of its burdensome physical and psychological, nearly permanent effects, by unlearning or rather deprogramming the information taught throughout compulsory educational institutions of yesterday and today. whereas a fact is literally based on the one-directional formatted belief of an individual's opinion, which may seem harmless to those who are satisfied with taking someone else's word for it, versus finding it out on their own through the process of diligent researching. By undergoing this process, an individual will soon discover that there is an actual difference between a fact and truth, and that most popular things that we were all taught in these compulsory educational institutions or by word of mouth that are considered to be a fact were never true. And with this new light form of discovery comes a positive change. And with this positive change comes an energetic realization of the actual truth, which adamantly reveals these multiple malicious hidden agendas surrounding what we call history, various forms of science, and even down to the English language, just to name a few. And speaking of just that, it is essential to recognize and master the understanding of the English language, because it can hold a person mentally captive merely by the misunderstanding of a word's definition, especially when it pertains to law, education, or even social science. There is a big reason why when a person recalls or names each letter of a word, that gesture or process is called spelling. The underlining word in this sense would obviously be spell, which could carry a variety of different essential meanings within itself. The majority of people would recall the most popular definition of spell, which pertains to writing or naming the letters of a word correctly, while on the other hand, the not so popular or rather uncommonly used definition of spell pertains to words that has magical powers, to say the least, but usually in a negative sense, because what you do is mentally and physically out of your control. What I mean by that is, your thoughts and actions, or rather your reality, is completely dictated and heavily influenced by the spell of the words you speak. Literally. This is why you would hear the saying, be careful what you wish for, because a person can play that same spelling trick of the English language amongst themselves inadvertently. We find this type of trick, uncommonly known as the Mandela effect, in the thinking that a particular word means one thing, and yet truthfully it would dangerously mean another, regardless of a person's opinion. The word minority is a very good example of that. And it also details why the so-called African Americans are labeled as the minority group here in America. For example, the Webster's Dictionary defines the word minority as a, quote, group that is the smaller part of a larger group, in which this definition could serve as the means as to why most political figures, news reporters, or even bigoted individuals, etc., for labeling the so-called African Americans as the minority group. In this case, the word minority relates to a particular population size, marking the so-called African Americans, or rather the indigenous American Indians in this sense, as being the least amount of people who makes up the United States population. And the spell, or rather the trick of this side of the minority definition, is that the so-called black Americans would just simply take someone's word for it and let it slide without any backlash. See, no one challenges the reported numbers of the U.S. population by race. In fact, they would say things like, I mean, why waste time doing that anyway? They can't be off by a significant amount, right? I mean, come on. They are the government, for Christ's sake. Why would they have a reason to lie about something so inadequate? My answer to that would be, that's just like deeming the statement, men lie, women lie, but numbers don't lie, as a fact. Whereas the information behind the creation of those numbers literally derived from men or women. So if they lie, then so can numbers, right? Think about it. Now, if Margaret Sanger, who is the founder of Planned Parenthood, implemented birth control pills in the United States, during her eugenics formatted population program called the Negro Project of 1939 in order to alter the population growth of only the so-called African Americans, then would that indicate to you that the so-called African Americans are the minority population of race in America, or not? Now let's take things a step further and look closer into the word minority. At a time where the Homestead Acts of 1862, 1866, and 1909 were implemented into what was known as, quote, the laws of the lands, as a means to forcefully, fraudulently allot lands of America or Turtle Island, originally owned and occupied by our indigenous ancestors, to those newly incoming pale-faced foreigners immigrating from parts of North, West, and especially South Africa, like Europe for example, to America by the millions according to the 1790 U.S. Census and beyond. Now before I go any further, you can recall that I have stated numerous times throughout my previous documentaries that everything was told to us in reverse, and where Europe is actually located is not excluded as an example of my statement. What I mean by that is, Europe was purposely predicted, or rather placed at the top of all other countries, displayed in Mercator world maps and other maps shortly thereafter, for a very particular reason. And that reason is due to
the Mercator projection has fostered European imperialist attitudes for centuries and created an ethnic bias against the Third World.
Salvatore Natoli of the National Council for Social Studies argues, in our society we unconsciously equate size with importance and even power. In our society we unconsciously equate size with importance and even power.
When third world countries are misrepresented, they're likely to be valued less. When Mercator maps exaggerate the importance of Western civilization, when the top of the map is given to the Northern Hemisphere and the bottom is given to the Southern, then people will tend to adopt top and bottom attitudes.
So, no, Europe is not where you think it is. In fact,
nothing is where you think it is.
Where is it?
I go into more informative detail about that in my documentary called The Untold Truth, about why history was told to you in reverse. That is a documentary that I highly recommend all people to watch in order to understand what I'm about to state next. Now let's go back in time a little to the years of 1913 and 1936, at a time when land acts were adopted into law in South Africa. Now what's very important to note here is that these laws are very identical to the Homestead Acts in America that I mentioned earlier. They were called the Native Land Act of 1913 and the Native Trust and Land Act of 1936. In which these...
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, before we get down to that, I'd like to come on back and bring my guests back on in, and we will come back because I'm going to designate this as part one, and then we'll come back to part two because there's so much information that we have to investigate. So I'm going to open up the line and bring my special guest back in, Dr. Walter Williams and Brother Yoel. Dr. Walter Williams, are you still with us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Could you tell me what you was about to tell me before we got down in the latest plugs that I put out there? Could you continue on what you were about to say? I'm listening.
What was that? Bring me up to date on that.
Well, you was telling me that the information that I was putting out there was creating confusion, and I interpret that to mean that I need to go back to what you was originally telling me about me and my family members and progenies and everybody else came to this country from Africa, and we are Africans, and we were never already here. We came from someplace else. Now, I have a question to ask you in regards to this. And my question is, if you could just think about it a minute, I don't know if you know anything about it, but could you tell me what is meant by the words manifest destiny, and where did that come from?
Manifest destiny? Well, I don't know the meaning of that. So you have to
Let me open up Brother Yoel line and bring him on in. Brother Yoel.
Wait, hold it. You let me finish this up.
All right. Okay, go ahead. We listen to you.
Okay. Do you agree that a monument that is known in history as the Great Pyramid is in Africa, was built in Africa?
Yes, I agree.
You agree to that, right? Was it built by African people or some other foreign people?
I have to agree that it was built by African people.
Okay, all right. Now, these African people, I'm going to repeat again, built the greatest monument that has ever been built on planet Earth. So great that you carry that monument, the picture of that monument in your wallets, pocketbooks, and purses every day in the form of the dollar bill.
Well, I have to agree with Dr. Williams. Dr. Williams, something else has come up. What they have done is they have found something bigger and greater than the Great Pyramid. And so now I'm forced to ask you a question, is when was the Great Pyramid put on the dollar, if you know the date and time that's put on it? Because when they have found something else, I've given you the information in regards to the people where you can go and actually see it for yourself. But when was it put on the dollar bill? If you know it. If you don't know it, you don't know it.
Wait, hold it. It was put on the dollar bill in 1913 when they created the Federal Reserve. Now, but
okay,
that's my answer to you. So I'm saying this. I'm going to stick to it. Do you agree that this monument that's known as the pyramid was built in Africa by African people?
Yes, I just already said yes.
Okay, you said that, right?
Yeah.
Now, it wasn't built by one people. It was built by a select group of people that built that pyramid, and it's still there in Africa. Okay? That is the beginning of civilization, where it started from. It didn't start in India, it didn't start in India, China, or Europe. It started there in Egypt. Okay? If you get my book, The Historical Origin of Christianity, I would suggest the listening audience read the introduction to my book, The Historical Origin of Christianity. Read that introduction, and it will give you a better understanding. So we're not talking about individual people. The reason why they don't want us to get back to ancient Egypt as a people is because they don't want you to get back to your greatness, because of all the lies and the confusion that they put out here in the minds of our people.
Wait a minute, Dr. Williams, I got to ask you one more time. When you say they don't want us to get back to ancient Egypt, are you saying that all of the people in America do we need to get back? And I'm not saying we're going to physically leave on boats and ships and planes and everything. Do we have to get back to Egypt in North Africa, or is Egypt already here and we've always been here? That's the point
I ask you a question. Is the Great Pyramid over here, or is it over in Africa?
in North Africa. That's the one they labeled.
That's your answer from me.
No, tell me. I need you to tell me. Do you need us to leave here and go over to North Africa because we are supposed to be African to gather towards the pyramids in North Africa? That's my question.
You don't have to believe anything about the pyramid.
I
you have to
don't believe. I'm asking you, is that what you want us to do?
All I want you to do is claim your African ancestors as being the first civilized people on Earth that brought civilization to this planet that we call Earth. And it came out of Africa, North Africa, the people that built the Great Pyramids. This is what they're trying to keep us from knowing. They don't want us to know as a group. You cannot use an individual. It has nothing to do with an individual. It has something to do with a group of people. And once you get back to ancient Egypt and claim your greatness, white supremacy is over with. But you have to know who you are.
Let me ask you right here. Now, are you saying...
Just a moment. Everything that you presented on this program tonight, all these documents brought confusion. They are completely confused.
But Dr. Williams, let me ask you this right here.
Tarhaka, just a moment, I'm not through. And you, Tarhaka,
talking to the microphone so we can hear you. Seems like you're turning your head.
I'm talking in the microphone, right?
Is what I'm trying to get you to.
I'm talking to you in the microphone. Okay? This is not an individual thing. You cannot disagree that the pyramid, the Great Pyramid, is not in Africa. You can't take the pyramid out of Africa and put it where you want to put it. Okay? Because of the confusion. This is what the European wants you to stay away from. That is our greatness is lying unclaimed in the continent of Africa. Okay? In ancient Egypt. That's where our greatness as a people, as an African people. Okay? They even tried to replicate ancient Egypt over in this hemisphere. That's why you see going to Washington, D.C., and you see all those monuments all over Washington, D.C., that is, brings you the monuments and the artifacts and et cetera, all in Washington, D.C., but all implicating that this is replacement of ancient Egypt over in this hemisphere. See? But it's not an individual thing. I heard nothing.
We got another caller. We got another caller with his hand raised. Hold on, Dr. Williams. Hold on. Area code 864. 864. You're on the air.
Peace and power, brother. Yes, sir. Peace and power. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing just fine. Who are you? Where you calling from? What's your question or comment?
My name is Equat Neef. I'm calling, right now I'm in Georgia, but I'm calling out of South Carolina.
All right, let us have it, man.
Well, you know, I heard, I think, some excerpts of some clips you were playing earlier, and it definitely does a lot of times sadden me. Hold one second. Yeah, it definitely does sadden me.
Come on, man.
Yes, sir. I'm driving. I'm driving, and I wanted to make sure I was going the right way.
Driving, talking to us. Pull over and then call back in, man.
Yeah, but I was stating because this is definitely.
So you driving? You ain't finna hurt yourself like that kind of this thing, man.
No. I'm speaking hands free. I'm hands free right now.
Right,
you coming out to speak. So but what I wanted to speak about was, you know, the influx of, you know, folk out here claiming or, you know, not hesitating to spit on the works regardless of how perfected or how flawed they are, you know, the works of our ancestors and those elders, esteemed elders, that have worked to put the pieces back together so we can now engage in levels of conscious conversation as it relates to detailing who we are, where we came from. And, you know, it's kind of hitting me because now what we're finding, because I heard the guy earlier talk about what's the use of finding, you know, out where you come from, or, you know, I think it's very important. Now you go back into the cosmologies. This is why why I took cosmologies as being very important. And when you look at African culture and tradition, regardless of where it is, a lot of times you see the importance of the quote-unquote myths or the stories or quote-unquote folklore, the cosmological stories that were able to paint an image or paint a picture of who you are and why it was important not to forget that. And if you ever forgot, how, you know, you kind of find your way. It served to me as a navigation system for us, and as it related to a worldview. And now everybody's talking about the mermaid, the Little Mermaid. I think a black girl played the Little Mermaid, right? And now they're talking about how Europeans don't like it. But, you know, you have black folks that...
You're right about that. We got all of that. We got that. You are absolutely correct. But this question I got for you. Are you a descendant? Did your family members come from Africa, which makes you an African American?
Well,
give me that
from where I stand, my grandfather was 93 years old when he passed. So I don't have hearsay. I actually have, you know, his word of mouth documented accounts of quote-unquote slavery, about the exchange of our family, of a part of our family, in the exchange of slavery in the South Carolina area, in the Newberry area, and you know, to be exact. So, you know, there is an exchange. Now, I hadn't done my, you know, submitted my saliva over to find out where my genetics go back to. But, you know, it has always been...
Don't do that. Don't you do that.
Absolutely. Right.
Man. You got a question for our guest, Dr. Walter Williams, because he's live to get a chance to talk to him. What's your question?
Right. Well, I wanted to ask, you know, to the doctor, you know, that in the face of us, because it seemed to me, in the face of us learning, finding out more about great African civilizations, the more that we came online from the works of Dr. Walter Williams, from the works of Runoko Rashidi, a lot of the countless others that have actually done the work. You know, what I found is after we came online to start to find out more, it seems like there was a distortion, you know, of now information. It seems almost intentionally. My question is, do we feel like it was purposely done to now distort, and while we were trying to connect the roots back to our cultural traditions that we lost, you know, from Africa, now we got a whole lot of people claiming that, hey, there's no need to do that we are already here. You know, was this done intentionally, or was this done with naivety, or, you know, just how do we feel like this is done, and how do you guys feel about it?
All right, I'm going to mute your mic so we can answer. Come on in, Dr. Williams. Did you hear that?
Yes, I heard it. You see, here, Tarhaka, I'm going to tell you again, stop individualizing us as a people. You ask that man, do you think that his ancestors came from Egypt, et cetera, okay? Ask as a whole, did we as an African people. And ask this question: were the African people who built the Great Pyramid, was it built in Africa? Were they African people? That's what you ask. And I keep telling you again, the reason why they don't want you to get back to ancient Egypt, I'm talking about the Europeans, is because they can keep confusion in your mind. Our greatness is lying in the continent of Africa unclaimed. I've been telling you that for years. There's a reason for that.
Hold on, Dr. Williams. Hold on, because I'm looking at the clock. Hold on. We got that. You've been telling me over and over. Hold on a minute. Let me bring in Brother Yoel. Brother Yoel, are you with us?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Based on the last plug that I played, what's your opinion on that?
On the last thing that you said, in terms of that you were talking to while you were talking to the other brother?
No, we'll forget about that. What I want you to answer me is, could you tell me, in your personal opinion, do you think, and just take your time now, all of us in this country are here as a result of coming from Africa, or were we already here?
I say that some of us were brought here maybe in slavery, but some of us are already here.
Okay, the people that were already here, do you think, in your personal opinion, that we have created built pyramids, built mounds, have artifacts, ancient cities, or any of that? Do you think, in your personal opinion, that we've done any of that? And if so, could you please give us if you got books, authors, or whatever that can verify that information? Because I don't feel like that I need to claim anything in North Africa. Because in my personal opinion, we got people that say that Africa is the richest continent on the planet. All the gold, all the silver, all the oil, all this right here. Well, why are people steady trying to leave all of these riches and greatness and magnificent stuff, fighting to get into the Americas to get a job or open up a small business so that they can send money back over there to their family members over there where all the riches is? What is it about this region? And what is the history of this region? What is the time limit? What is it that's been covered up about this region that we need to know about? Especially in the face of the fact that I know I don't have no identity from coming from someplace else. I've always been here. So why would I need to claim anything anywhere else when I'm claiming what I always claimed and where I always been? Could you help me out with that, brother?
I'll do the best I can, brother.
Before you answer, we're going to take a little, just hold on, we're going to take a little quick break and we'll be right back. Before you answer, hold on, ladies and gentlemen, y'all hold on a minute.
I'm in the book here from the Smithsonian Institution Bureau of American Ethnology, Bulletin 73. It says The Early History of the Creek Indians and Their Neighbors by John R. Swanson. All right? And it says here on page 43, it says the Spaniards have visited several regions of that vast country, and they're like, I believe, in the area of South Carolina, North Carolina, where they first arrived in the 1500s. You caught my past videos. They're called Arambi, Guaycaya, Cuajate, Tansaca, and Pajor. Do you know the name? Do you ever heard of these names, these tribes? The color of the inhabitants is what? Dark brown. The color of the inhabitants is dark brown, dark brown. None of them have any system of writing, but they preserve traditions of great antiquity in rhymes and chants. In rhymes and chants? So we got inhabitants who are dark brown, who be rhyming and chanting. Rhyming, right? Rhyming, freestyling, chanting, rhymes, dark brown. Put it together. Dancing and physical exercises are held in honor, and they are passionately fond of ball games. They're very fond of ball games. Who does this sound like? Let's go again. Inhabitants are dark brown, right? They pass their time in rhymes and chants, and they're very fond of ball games, in which they exhibit the greatest skill. They're very good at it, too. Alright, they're very good at it. They're fond of ball games, and they're very good at it. They're dark brown. Their complexion is dark brown, and they be rhyming. Who they talking about, so-called Negro? Alright, so we got this book. It says here, a voyage of discovery into the South Sea and Bering Straits for the purpose of exploring a northeast passage undertaken in the years 1815, 1818 at the expense of His Highness the Chancellor of the Empire, Count Romanov, in the ship Rurik, under the command of the Lieutenant in the Russian Imperial Navy, Otto von Kotzebue. Alright, this is Volume 1, 1821. And it says here, the coast of California is inhabited by so many tribes, that there are frequently in the mission Indians of more than 10 different races, each which has its own language. Alright? As we were leaving the mission, we were surprised by two groups of Indians, which were also composed of different nations. They were different. They came in military array, that is, quite naked, and painted with gay colors. The head of the most were adorned with feathers and other finery. Some of them, however, had their long, disordered hair covered with down, and their faces daubed in the most frightful manner. There is nothing remarkable in their war dance, and I only regretted that I did not understand the words of their song. The physiognomy of these Indians is ugly, stupid, and savage. Otherwise they are well formed.
Since the late 1630s, the people of color in America have been struggling with the actual account of their true identities. After being labeled a race of people under certain classifications based upon skin hue, the complexity of learning their background, heritage, and culture was relied upon the Western European settlers that won the hundreds of war invasions that took place immediately in the year 1492 and beyond. The inability of governments of America and Europe to come to grips with their dark past and allow the Aborigines, who are natives to the land of America, as well as the descendants of everyone else involved, the healing required to move forward is not only a denial of basic human rights, but a telltale sign of the type of current racism, economic neglect, and mistreatment that will surely come to light during this generation of life. The threads of these ancient cultures of the Aborigine people having existed here for tens of thousands of years prior to the arrival of the Europeans must be preserved, strengthened, and woven back into a quilt that tells the unique story of not only their past, but of their bright future as well. The reasons for this runs much deeper than one may assume. One reason being, we have thousands of ancient history records, artifacts, tombstones, and hieroglyphics, etc., all in Africa. But to really put the full puzzle together, one must learn the facts of the actual accounts of the Aborigines of America, because they are the direct ancestors of the now called African Americans. In today's America, we are witnessing the now called Native Americans battle against the federal government over the Dakota pipeline. They are protesting because of the government's approval of this pipeline forces the removal of hundreds of their ancestors' respectful and sacred cemeteries from the land. But actions like this are not uncommon by the federal government. In fact, the immigration of native Indians of this land started in 1492, and one untold example of that took place in the year of 1838. At that time, the federal government began forced removal of any Cherokee Indian and or Creek Indian families who had neither applied for state citizenship nor moved to their newly established Indian territory in the state of Oklahoma on their own. Log on to patreon.com/Dane Calloway or paypal.me/Dane Calloway to support me, my channel, and my content. Merchandise is now available at I'mJustHereToMakeYouThink.com.
Black America is potentially the most dangerous group of humans alive today. Dangerous to who? Dangerous to the corporate empire, Illuminati, imperial scum, whatever you want to call them, white supremacists.
White supremacy is the problem. Jews just happen to be white.
How much of the problems in the black community are the blacks' own fault?
Well, white supremacy is the main problem in our community.
How much of the problems are your own fault?
Excuse me, if we resolve white supremacy, we will resolve the problems of unemployment, we will resolve the problems of bad housing. The Reagan administration probably represented the epitome of white supremacy by cutting into every domestic livable program that whites and blacks had, especially poor people, and they showed their relationship with these people by proving their insensitivity. Now, Mr. Cook,
and the reason they're dangerous is because they're quite easily united. It might seem not true because there's so much division within black people in America, but the only reason they're divided is because the corporate empire spends billions of dollars keeping them divided because they are potentially dangerous.
Mr. Coakley, you've attacked Jesse Jackson, you attacked the late Mayor Harold Washington, you called them colorless. What black leaders, political leaders in this country do you respect?
Well, I think politics has a way of accommodation. I don't think we have true political leaders in the sense of that you're going to find purity in politics. Politics is about accommodation and compromise. When our black leaders go into politics, as was discussed recently in Harper's Magazine, blacks have to prove to whites that they will protect their interests first. That's why politics is not the type of game that we're going to continue to invest all our time in, because it's proven that it doesn't work. Politics will not whip white supremacy, but clear, accurate, documented challenges to white supremacy, as well as action, grassroots action, taking against the forces of white supremacy.
What makes them dangerous? Well, 45 million people united in the US would be very dangerous. What kind of things is dangerous? Well, you might think I'm talking about protesting or getting together and rallying and that kind of stuff. Well, no, that's not the kind of danger I'm talking about. 45 million people united could do some serious damage to the financial market.
serious damage to the financial market, serious damage to the financial market, serious damage to the financial market, serious damage to the financial market.
So I'm dark-skinned with an accent, and when you had an accent back then, Africans, well, it wasn't that many Africans in America at that time. It was mostly Jamaicans. So you had an accent, you're automatically Jamaican.
Right.
Africans, well, it wasn't that many Africans in America at that time. It was mostly Jamaicans.
You have to be logical. If I know that in this hotel room they have food every day, and I'm knocking on the door every day to eat, and they open the door, let me see the throwing food around, but they're telling me there's no food in there every day. I'm standing outside trying to sing my way in. We are hungry, please let us in. We are hungry, please let us in. After about a week, that song is going to change this. We hungry, we need some food. After 2-3 weeks, it's like, give me all the food, racking out the door. After a year, then you just like, I'm picking the lock, coming through the door, blasting. We asked 10 years ago. We was asking with the Panthers. We was asking with that, with civil rights movement. We was asking, now those people that were asking, they're all dead and in jail. So now what do you think we're going to do?
What that was all about, the revolution will not be televised. That was about the fact that the first change that takes place is in your mind. You have to change your mind before you change the way you live and the way you move. So when we said that the revolution will not be televised, we were saying that, like, the thing that's going to change people is something that no one will ever be able to capture on film. It'll just be something that you see, and all of a sudden you realize, I'm on the wrong page, or I'm on the right page, but I'm on the wrong note. And I've got to get in sync with everyone else to understand what's happening in this country.
In today's society of America, millions of people of all complexions are still undergoing the effects of a variety of dominant social engineering experiments, which just so happens to play a prominent role among their everyday lives unknowingly. Not only that, there are in fact particular prominent groups of people that have set the mandatory rules and regulations that all American citizens must abide by, still to this very day. And when it specifically comes to the so-called African Americans, or rather the descendants of the copper-colored indigenous people who occupied all of the now American lands pre-colonial times, the experimental methodologies are deeply rooted, especially physically and mentally, by way of things such as industrialism, environmental racism, compulsory education, manipulative indoctrination, paper genocide, and eugenics. However, I would like for you to note that the freedom of having life is like a seed. It cannot grow on its own and become a plant unless the climate changes environmentally. Now, many of you can recall hearing the phrase, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I agree with it to a certain extent, because even though you may be doing great right now, you should always make room for improvements, or rather changes, because it's better to be prepared than repaired after the damage is already done. Which brings me to my very first point of this segment, and that is, why are people of color in America considered to be the biggest threat throughout American society? Now, this question alone would be continuously answered throughout this video and my other correlating documentaries, because of how much detailed information is critically important to note when answering this question. This threat can be traced all the way back to the late 1700s and very early 1800s, at a time when white African and European colonizationalists, or rather kidnappers, were afraid of the threat of being murdered by the so-called coloreds, or rather the indigenous people of North America, due to the multiple Indian raids, rebellions, documented and undocumented wars rapidly occurring during this time period. This is also the very same time period where these kidnappers demanded that the Negroes be removed from the lands of America and shipped away to newly established American colonized lands in Africa along the coast. Multiple religious societies campaigned for this idea to become a reality, especially the Catholics and the Quakers, just to name a few. But the ball began to roll once John Lynch wrote a letter to the president, According to records held by the National Archives, in a letter to then former President Thomas Jefferson, dated December 25, 1810, John Lynch, who colonized lands he named after himself called Lynchburg, Virginia, made a descriptive proposition to Thomas Jefferson that called for the, quote, colonization of the nigger people on the coast of Africa, so that a settlement can be established for immigrating the freed people of color out of North America and into Africa somewhere along the coast. In my documentary called African American Slaves in West Africa, History Books Are Lying, Part 2, I shared much detailed, informative information in relation to what really happened in American history. I exposed that we were all led to believe that our ancestors were stolen from parts of West Africa and then shipped to the Americas, when in reality, that information was told to us all in reverse. Some of our ancestors were forcefully relocated from southern east lands of North America to lands west of the Mississippi River, and also along the coast of Africa, and especially South and West Africa. I highly recommend that you watch that video, for it is critically important for the sake of our real documented history. Now, another side of this threat would be allowing the people of color to think freely. Being as though English was not our ancestors' original language to begin with, the early European and African colonizationalists implemented manipulative methods to force their own traditions, language, and cultures, just to name a few, upon our ancestors mentally, which in turn rapidly obstructed our ancestors' well-being physically, systematically. This method was also purposely designed to decimate their literacy and critical thinking capabilities, along with quelling the thoughts of retaliation by fear-mongering, allowing for this social engineering format of eugenics to prevail from generation to generation, affecting only those who are forcefully under the spell of its digested forms of slavery, or rather oppression, under the mysterious provisions and racist ideologies of white supremacy.
First day. So I asked my students, okay, what happened during Reconstruction right after the Civil War? What went on there? And what happened to me was an aha reaction, or I might better call it a no reaction, because 16 out of my 17 students said to me, that's the time when, right after the Civil War, Reconstruction, blacks took over the government of the southern states. But they were too soon out of slavery, and so they screwed up, and white folks had to take control again.
Birth of a Nation,
exactly.
The 1903 movie.
Birth of a Nation, Gone with the Wind, all rolled into one. Birth of a Nation, Gone with the Wind, all rolled into one. And of course, these are all African American students. I thought, my gosh, what must it do to you to believe that the one time your group was center stage in American history, they screwed up? Now, it'd be a different matter if this happened, but it didn't happen. This is, in fact, what we in sociology call BS history.
All right, everybody, we're back. Tonight's broadcast is civilization started in Africa, not in any China and in Europe. Our special guest is Dr. Walter Williams, and we're going to bring him back in. I see we got another caller with his hand raised, but let me bring him. Dr. Williams, are you still with us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I certainly can, Dr. Williams. Do you still think that we are confused tonight?
Yes, I'm going to tell you why.
All right.
Okay. This is not a criticism. This is a criticism of love and respect. Because I say I differ with you, it doesn't mean that I don't respect you. Because I say I differ with you, it doesn't mean that I don't love you. I just differ with you. Now, you asked Yoel, where did the name Negro come from? Negro and black is synonymous. So therefore, let's go back and find out where that name comes from. In 1091, the Spanish people of Spain, who were uncivilized, asked, A-S-K, the ancient Egyptians of North Africa, who lived along the Mediterranean in countries like Egypt, Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, Mauritania. Now, Mauritania is not facing the Mediterranean, but it's in North Africa. It faces the Atlantic Ocean. So I want to clear that up. But those 6 countries, 5 is in the Mediterranean, facing the Mediterranean, and 1, Mauritania, faces the Atlantic Ocean. Okay? Now, these uncivilized African people in these uncivilized Spanish people in 1091 asked ASK, the ancient Egyptians who lived in the country called Morocco, to come and bring civilization to them. All the African people who live in those 6 countries along and bordered the Mediterranean, and like I said, Mauritania borders Atlantic Ocean. So the people, the African ancient Egyptians, now these are ancient Egyptians are asking this. The ancient Egyptians used the country called Morocco because of the Strait of Gibraltar that extends more into the Mediterranean than the other 5 countries I mentioned. And at the end of the Strait of Gibraltar, one has to take a boat and travel 8.9 miles to reach the shores of Spain. Once in Spain, the Spanish people called these ancient Egyptian descendants who used Morocco in the Strait of Gibraltar and this boat I was telling you about to enter Spain, the Spanish people called them black or Moors. So that's, and see, black in Spanish is synonymous with Negro. Negro and black is the same thing. Black and Negro is the same thing. So this is where you got the name Negro from and black from. Okay?
Well, Dr. Williams, hold on a minute. First of all, could you hold on 1 second? Let me, hold on 1 second. Brother Yoel, are you with us? Brother Yoel, yes. Are you with us? Yes. Okay. Yeah. I don't recall asking Dr. Williams the question about where Negroes. I don't recall that. Mm-hmm. Could you hold on 1 second? Hold on 1 second, because we got another caller with his hand raised. Area code 864. You're live on the air. Which question to comment before I get Dr. Walter?
Oh yes, sir. I just wanted to chime in and just speak about the one time, and I think like Dr. Walter Williams said, is everybody's not going to agree, but I think letting us reason together, letting us sit down and rationalize, and like I said, to me it seems like to the brink of when we realize that the ancient Egyptian civilization, because I think your name is Tarhaka, right, brother?
Say it again.
I said your name is Tarhaka, correct?
That's right.
Okay, so even in claiming a name, really, because we wouldn't like to try to, favor ourselves after Europeans, like going back in and to disingenuously claim things that doesn't even really belong to us. So even when you call yourself Tarhaka, or when I call myself Ikwani,
which is a name or term in Medu Neter that we can recognize from that time. I think by now claiming those terms, it does now allow us to claim the culture. You understand? You got a lot of people that are out there saying hotel, but they're doing everything going against African peace or peace, divine peace for the Africans.
All
So
right,
I
all
want
right. Hold it. Don't go nowhere. Hold on one second. Hold on. We're going to get right back with the brother, but I'm looking at the clock, and y'all hold on a minute. We'll be right back with you.
Hello, everybody. I want to introduce you to The Great Debate by Dr. Walter Williams. He single-handedly laid out the facts in this powerful debate against Mr. Munir Muhammad of the Nation of Islam, Chester Blair, a prominent lawyer in Chicago, Illinois, and Reverend Henry Hardy, a prominent minister in Chicago, and Prince Azio Ben Israel of the Hebrew Israelites. This debate was hosted by a retired policeman named W.L. Lillard. Now, the whole thing was a setup by Lillard and his gang, but it didn't work. They brought what they believed to the table, but Dr. Walter Williams brought what he knew for a fact and what he could prove and laid it on the table. We are now in the age of knowing. The age of walking around believing in stuff is over. For your copy of The Great Debate, go to TarhakaDataElimination.org. That's TarhakaDataElimination.org, or contact me by phone. My number's on the website. Oh, and by the way, the lawyer got bust up too. The Great Debate. Get your copy today. Good day and peace.
All right, brother, you back on. Now, you understand what you're saying, that do you have a question? Why again, man?
Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
That's what I want to hear.
Well, I'm gonna ask the question because I'm about it.
Sound like you're breaking up. Hello?
Oh,
you sound like you're breaking up.
Hello? Can you hear me now, sir?
Yeah, but sound like you're breaking up a little bit.
My question is that it's starting to become a little popular. It's beginning to become more and more popular that black folk are now disowning their African roots, even when they have African claim names that they claim themselves, right? So in that case, my question is, hold on a minute. Okay.
What if, regardless of what their name is or what they name themselves, they were never Africans in the first place? How do you explain that?
Now you say that is a what if, and then that would have to be proven. But right now, what thus says, like you think I heard a conversation, is that all humans come from that continent that we call Africa. That's what science says, that all human forms come, that like I think it's common, like that's what science says. I could tell you this, that when you go to a zoo, to any zoo in America, this is a way that you can kind of prove things. When you go to any zoo, you can't show me a zoo that will ever give you, right, a theme outside of Africa. That's why you're always going to hear the African drums drumming. They always are going to show you, now these are animals. They're not saying that animals came here from America, or they're not giving you an American theme to show you. They're kind of pointing to where the animals come from. Even when science says the mother of the lion, it comes from Africa. It's not only with the human species. So my question is that in the brink of this time, when we started to make the connection of saying, well, hey, this was us, because right now we have a culture where our children are running around talking about killing each other, while you have conscious Africans arguing over if they came from Africa or if they came from America. My question is that because
I'm having some brothers in the African shop named Sphinx Paul. The only Sphinx that I know is in Africa. Now they are saying the same thing, that we had bigger pyramids here in America, but there is no picture of that in the African shop. My question is, where is the overwhelming amount of documentation to show that us as blacks or us as Africans, because one thing you know about the Africans is that wherever we went, we signed, we carved, we even put graffiti up to let you know it was us that did it. Where is the evidence of that here in the Americas outside of teepees, outside of mounds, inside of cultural tradition that belong to the Native Americans, that didn't belong to us as Africans or whatever we wanted to call ourselves as melanated people, or, I'm kind of questionable of who has the content of the culture that the black folk were living here in America if it was so substantial.
All right, so you believe that you are an African? Yes.
That's what I know. That's what I know.
Okay, all right.
That's what I know.
Hold on right there. Hold on, we're going to try to answer your question. Hold on, I'm going to have to mute your mic. This is a question that got to put out, and I want y'all to help me out with this, because the only place that I found where we got alligators and crocodiles dwelling in the same spot is in the Florida Everglades. Just hold on to that right there. Let me open up this here. Brother Yoel, you want to address the brother's question that he's asking? He did ask a question. You with me, Brother Yoel?
Okay, well, first of all, me and him kind of on the same page, but
okay.
My thing is this, and it goes back to something else I think he alluded to, and that was, see, all of this information is all, once again, goes back to why, if what Professor Williams said is true about ancient Egypt is the birthplace of civilization, then over here, why would they, who is it, and why would they confuse and confound the whole world over such a, and what other place on the planet that they investigate, explore, and dig up, and all of the things that they're doing outside of Egypt? What other places they seem to have a hard-on for in the world? It seems to me that there's some reason that they're digging in Egypt more than any other place on the planet. Why is that? And then why would they get the descendants of the Egyptians, these people here in America, who may be called by many other names and who might have been floating around on this people's property, as I said earlier, way before Columbus came here? Why would they confuse and confound the people here? Why would that be necessary? Except that if we are the first people coming from the Egyptians, then maybe because you might be the true owners of this piece of property before it broke all apart. They don't want you to ever know that, because they don't ever want you to come in power. Because it's something about somebody who continues to focus a lot of attention on the people who they say ain't nothing, but yet they focus their attention on that nothing every day. Why is that? Why would they spend so much time on us as a people in this country? It seems like to me we ain't much of a threat, to me, because most of us are still confused. There's only a few of us having this conversation that we're having right now, and you can't have it too much, because as I see it as a bookstore owner, we need to look at this picture from a holistic perspective. Why? Because a lot of people who I know the history went out and took that vaccine. They didn't understand the politics of their enemy and how their enemy would instill this fear in them to get them to take a vaccine. So you studied too much history, and you didn't study the politics of how your enemy, what lengths he would go through to get rid of you by making you take a vaccine, and a series of vaccines at that. After you know already all your life is a testimony to him trying to kill you all your life. Not you personally, I'm saying, but us as a people. So what is it that what those people who I thought were conscious was missing, that they went out and did that? But again, it all goes back to, like I said, why and who is it that went through all this trouble to confuse the whole world, wrote a bunch of books, and now they want to get rid of the books and all of that. I say that I think some of us was already sitting on this piece of property before it floated away from Africa. If you go back and look at the map, you can push the map together like a puzzle. And whatever the time limit is on that, I think we was all over that piece of property. That's why you got us. You can find us down in South America and Peru, all down in Argentina and all of that. And all these mention of this brown people, that you have some of them clips that you were playing. This is the reason why that's being mentioned, because we were all over the place. And as the brother said, we did leave thumbprints all over the place. The Olmec heads down in Mexico, that's us. But you left it. But how old is that? So if we go back to how old that was, and when we think that was how far that goes back, then that goes back to when you were here, and you left that thumbprint. And these artifacts he mentioned, you talking about the Mayans and the Aztecs. Well, did they have the same science that the Egyptians had, or were these people Egyptian of Egyptian descent? And some of them had architects who knew that science, and they did it here. Or did they go there and study there? Or what? So there's a lot of unanswered questions, and that's why I say it's all food for thought and grounds for further investigation. And we need to be trying to look at why they are going through all of this, because there's some reason they going through great lengths to keep us dumbfounded. Okay? That's all I got to say.
All right, my brother. What we're going to do is bring Dr. Walter Williams in, and he's going to have to speak for his last words and show us how to get a hold of you and your books and where you at and all of that there. But we do that as fast. So I'll miss your mic and let him, and we'll go ahead and we put it in the station now. And all right. All right. I appreciate you getting out to hear your voice again, man.
All right, good night.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to bring in my special guest again, Dr. Walter Williams. We're going down to the close now. Could you give us your last words and tell us how to get your books, and tell us, don't you forget to tell us about where Brother Yoel, where he at, and how we're going to do about that now.
Right. I'm going to get it straight this time.
All right.
I want to say this. I did not say or never confuse that the ancient Egyptians was the first people on earth, the oldest people on earth. No way you can prove that. What you can say is that they had the first civilization on earth by way of creating the alphabet and so forth and so on, and the mathematics. I'm going to clear that up. Number two, I'm going to clear up that once over in this hemisphere, once over in Spain, the Spanish called our people black or Moors. Black and Negro is synonymous, one and the same. Now, once over here, coming on a ship with Christopher Columbus, over in this Americas, in 1492, for 127 years, we built a civilization over here in this hemisphere that no one talks about. They go from, they talk the beginning history from slavery. No, you don't do that. What about 1492 to 127 years before slavery? You got to factor that in. And the people call themselves Negroes and blacks. But where is Negro land and where is black land? It's nowhere on the world map. You see? So, if a person calls himself a Negro and black, that means that he does not know his ancestral homeland. So therefore, the descendants of the ancient Egyptians are here in America calling themselves blacks and Negroes. That's who the ancient Egyptians are. That's who the descendants of the ancient Egyptians are. The African people that call themselves blacks and Negro. And I told you how they got the name black and Negro from the Spanish. Okay? So, you can...
But I got one more question, though. So, you made that perfectly clear, Dr. Williams.
So what now?
I say you made that perfectly clear.
Okay.
So, what we are supposed to do, the Negro who is absolutely indigenous, I didn't say native, I say absolutely indigenous to
what?
this land. Are we supposed to this land where we at? Are we supposed to go across the Atlantic and embrace the place they calling Egypt in North Africa, or is Egypt already in the Americas first before it ever was over there in Africa? That's my question.
Brother Tarhaka, I don't answer that question. I told you and explained to you. I explained this years ago to you.
Say it again.
About where the name Negro and black came from. I told you that from the Spanish.
I ain't talking about the name. I'm talking about the people. What do you want the people to do? Because we're already home. We've been home all the time.
No.
The people look like me. The name,
that's not what you said.
Black, African American, all of right there. We're already home.
Tarhaka, that's not what
already here. As far as we're concerned, it's always been here. So
I
am not an African, and we're not Africans. So what are you talking about?
Okay, I don't explain that to you. I'm not going to explain it to you no more. Okay?
That's okay.
Now
I appreciate it.
You said that you are Tarhaka Mount El Bay. Okay?
That's what I named myself.
Okay, that's what you named yourself. Why did you name yourself that?
Because I wanted to. But come on, man, we got a minute and 36 seconds.
Okay, I'm through with the program now, and you can buy my books at Brother Yoel's bookstore in Chicago. Order my books by phoning him at area code 773-768-8869. 768-8869. That's the Underground Bookstore. You can order my books, The Historical Origin, Christianity and Historical Origin of Islam. And if you live in a town where there's a black bookstore, you go there and you can order my books from them. Or go on Amazon, you can order my books. So I prefer you order my books, if you can, from Brother Yoel, the Underground Bookstore. Okay? And that's what I have to say to close out our program. And of course, it's a great debate that Tarhaka has been talking about all the time.
Okay. Well, I certainly appreciate you being on, Dr. Williams. We're going to come back with part 2. Dr. Williams is going to be my guest. Might have somebody else as a guest along with us. But we definitely do part 2 with this broadcast so we get down into the nitty-gritty about this thing, about the identity. I feel just like Morgan Freeman when he was on 60 Minutes, and the guy was saying about the Black History Month. He said, well, look, you can't relegate me to no Black History Month, you know. And he said, well, first of all, I'm not African, and I'm not African either. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed the broadcast, and I appreciate y'all being here.